So it looks like, I was checking the weather and it looks like this weekend finally the warm weather we are all waiting for is going to be here. So it's going to be plus in the weekend and then the next week too. So today I wanted to talk about waiting upon the Lord. It is, you find that in Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 31. Can you put it from King James Version? I'm going to read it from Isaiah chapter 40 verse 31. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. And there's such beautiful and encouraging words like this. Is they who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. But if you ask, it's such a difficult thing to do. Especially when things are not going your way. When things are difficult and when you feel that nothing is happening. See, in those circumstances to wait upon the Lord. But still the word asks, you have to wait upon the Lord. I was thinking about, waiting is something we learn. What I mean by learn is that there are some fears we learn. We are not born with those fears. But what happens is like as we grow, we learn some fears. There are some fears we learn. For example, like in my childhood, when I was a boy, I learned to be I don't think I was born to be afraid of the dark, but I learned to be afraid of the dark. And that's because, all in those days, nobody cared what you told a child. So all the elders and all the adults, they told all the spooky stories, ghost stories and all. And then that's what will happen. Just started getting afraid of the dark. Now waiting is also something like that. It's something you learn. Because, I started to work on computers almost 25 years back. Now, at that time, there was no laptops, no internet. It was a time when just these personal computers were being introduced. I worked in a bank. And in those days, like the printers, if you now see those printers, then they were so slow. Like if a bank customer came and he wanted a statement, these printers would just print one line at a time, line by line by line. And those days we just used to wait. We used to just watch. And everybody was impressed because just to print one page, line by line by line would go. But everybody was impressed because the alternative was you had to be written by hand. And that would take much longer than what this line print is. But just think about this younger generation here. For them, what is that? They have also learned to wait. But for them, the waiting time, just click the button, the page should come out of the printer. See, they have also learned to wait. The similar way, I was thinking, let's say if you go to a grocery store, what do we expect? We find the shortest queue, we join that line, we join that, and then we expect to be, as soon as we go, we expect to serve and be out. But let's say in a grocery store, they say, after you have done your groceries, they say, okay, there are these chairs, just sit in those chairs, and then when we are ready for you, we'll call you, and then you come to the line to get checked out. What do you think, we'll do that? We'll just say that here are your groceries, keep them, I'm going to the next store. But just imagine the same thing. When you go to your doctor and the receptionist says, the doctor will see you, please be seated. What do? The first thing we'll start looking how to pass the time. Whether I should take out my phone or whether I should look at a magazine. Because, see, something is there. We have learned to wait in a doctor's. Because of the things that we have learned to wait in a doctor's office. So that's what I say, we have to learn to wait upon the Lord. That's something we have to learn. It's something and in the Old Testament, we see two kings, King Saul and King David. Now the difference between them was King Saul did not wait upon the Lord, whereas King David, he waited upon the Lord. Both were anointed. Both were anointed by the same prophet. And if you see, like, when Saul was anointed by prophet Samuel, God told Samuel that I have chosen him. 1 Samuel chapter 9 verse 17. And when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said unto him, Behold the man whom I spake to thee of, this same shall reign over my people. God told Samuel, I have chosen him to be the king. He was chosen. And then when the prophet Samuel anointed Saul, he told him of 3 events. He said, when you go out, after saying, when you go out, these 3 things will happen. And I think there was a spiritual significance to those 3 events. Because Saul was being called to a very high calling. And when the prophet Samuel when he prophesied about these 3 events, there was something about these 3 events. The first one we find was in 1 Samuel chapter 10 verse 2. Let's start from chapter 1 verse 1. 1 Samuel chapter 10 verse 1. Then Samuel took a flask of oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, saying, Has not the Lord anointed you leader over his inheritance? Verse 2. Then he said, When you leave me today, you will meet 2 men near Rachel's tomb at Zelzah on the border of Benjamin. They will say to you, The donkeys you set out to look for have been found. And now your father has stopped thinking about them and is worried about you. He is asking, What shall I do about my son? The first thing he said was like, he was saying that, he said, at Rachel's tomb, you will meet 2 people and they will tell you something about it. Now, Rachel was the great, I don't know how many times you have to say, but she was the great-great-grandmother of Saul. Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin. And Rachel gave birth, was the mother of Benjamin. But there, at that tomb, like he was, the prophet said, like, something like, you have to, what he said was like, whatever you are looking, the earth, the donkeys have been found and now your father is worrying about you. Now if you look at Rachel was, in the Old Testament, if you read about Rachel, she was somebody who did not wait upon the Lord. When you look at Genesis chapter 30, verse 1 to 2, when she found that her sister Leah, now she was having children and she was not having any children. No, she didn't wait upon the Lord. So what happens when you don't wait upon the Lord? First, she turned towards man. She turns towards men. But that's what she said. Genesis chapter 30, verse 1 to 2. See, when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, Give me children or I'll die. When you don't wait upon the Lord, that's what. She turned to man, and Jacob became angry with her and said, Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children? Jacob was helpless. She turned to man, but he was helpless. He couldn't do anything. But then what she did was like, after this failed, she did something else. And that's verse 14. Genesis chapter 30, verse 14. So, it It was Leah's son, Reuben. See, during wheat harvest, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." You know, these mandrake plants, in those days, there was just like they believe in folklore, there was a belief in those days that mandrakes will help a woman to conceive, to bear a child. So she was wait, now what? Just look what had happened. First she turned to man, and now then she's now relying on these mandrakes. She thinks that these mandrakes will help her to conceive, to bear a child. But then nothing happened. Nothing happened. You know, when she conceived was Genesis chapter 30. Is it 19, verse 19? It's not. 22, verse 22. It says, "Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb." That's when she received. And from this one, it looks like he listened to her. She was crying out to God. That's when it happened. And in her life also, her walk was not right before the Lord. Rachel's walk before the Lord. Because when they were leaving, Jacob was at his father-in-law's house, Laban. And then he left, after he heard from the Lord, he left Laban with all his family, with all his possessions and all. He left Laban. And then afterwards, Laban came pursuing Jacob. And Laban was looking for something. He asked Jacob, "Why have you stolen my gods?" So I think they were idols. There must have been idols. And you know who took it? It was Rachel who took those idols. And what she did was, she kept it on a camel. She was under the camel, where she was sitting. She had kept it there. And somehow she managed, and her father looked for everywhere. He was searching everywhere. But she managed to make her father not to search the camel. That's how she carried those idols with her. You see her walk. And you know, when she had to give up was, you find it again in Genesis chapter 35 and verse 1 to 5. If you read it. It was then God said to Jacob, "Go up to Bethel and settle there and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau." So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Get rid of the foreign gods who are with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone." So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had, and the rings in their ears. And Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell upon the towns all around them, so that no one pursued them. Now that is when, I don't know if she had given up before, but that was a time when everyone had given all their foreign gods, the idols, to Jacob, and he buried them. Instead of, can you put it in King James Version? And I'm going to read from verse 4, Genesis chapter 35, verse 4. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods which were in their hands, and the earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree which was by Shechem. So he took all the idols and he hid them under that terebinth tree. So that was what Samuel, I think, was telling Saul. At the tree, at that Rachel's tomb, he was asking Saul to remember all these things. He was making Saul to think about this. Now what he should do. Now he was going to take up this high calling. So what he should do at that. Then the next one he said was, the next thing he said afterward was, just 1 Samuel chapter 10 verse 3 to 4. Put it in King James. Then shalt thou go on forward from thence, and thou shalt come to the plain of Tabor, and there shall meet thee three men going up to God to Bethel, one carrying 3 kids, and another carrying 3 loaves of bread, and another carrying a bottle of wine. And they will salute thee, and give thee 2 loaves of bread, which thou shalt receive of their hands. This is New King James Version, and I just want to read it from New King James. It says, verse 10, verse 2, then you shall go on forward from there, and come to the terebinth tree of Tabor. There 3 men going up to God at Bethel will meet you. One carrying 3 young goats, another carrying 3 loaves of bread, and another carrying a skin of wine. You know, it is like here it says, it will be at the terebinth tree of Tabor. There you are going to meet. You should go forward and come to the terebinth tree of Tabor. If you see that terebinth tree, what did it represent like? If you see on in 35 verse 4, Genesis chapter 35 verse 4. Can you go to the New King James Version? Under the terebinth tree they had buried their idols. So and then afterwards there he says and there at that tree he showed these 3 things. One was the goat, the kids were the lambs, the goats, and then the bread and the wine. So that was the second thing he talked about to King Saul. The second thing is that's what is going to happen. They're going to give you the bread. You know, I think he was just foretelling what was going to happen. What was that thing that was going to happen? And then afterwards he said, 1 Samuel chapter 10 and verse 5. And after that you will go to Gibeah of God, where there is a Philistine outpost. And as you approach the town, you will meet a procession of prophets coming down from the high place with lyres, tambourines, flutes, and harps being played before them, and they will be prophesying. Verse 6. The Spirit of the Lord will come upon you in power, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person. Once these signs are fulfilled, do whatever your hands find to do, for God is with you. Then he said, the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you. Now it looks for me, when you look at those 3 things, I think the first one, the Rachel's tomb, because of what, if you remembered, it signified repentance for him. And then the tree where they offered the kids the bread and the wine, that was the salvation. And then it was the power of the Holy Spirit. Now after he was telling these 3 things, Samuel said to Saul that these 3 events are going to happen. And they exactly as he said, all 3 of this happened. But then afterwards he also said in verse 8, 10 verse 1 Samuel chapter 10 verse 8. Go down ahead of me to Gilgal. I will surely come down to you to sacrifice burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. But you must wait 7 days until I come to you and tell you what you are to do. Exactly like as prophet Samuel said, like when the prophets, when he went there, the prophets were coming down and Saul prophesied with them. And it says that people were wondering, oh, they said, is Saul also among the prophets? But there's one thing he asked him. He said, wait. Just go, but you must wait 7 days until I come to you. He asked him to wait, and that was he had to wait upon the Lord. And then when you see further along, when the Philistines attacked Israel, at that time there was panic in the armies of Israel, in the army of Israel. 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 6 to 8. When the men of Israel saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard pressed, they hid in caves and thickets among the rocks and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel, but Saul did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. That was the situation. And Saul and the prophet had asked him to wait upon the Lord. So even in that situation, Samuel had asked him, you wait upon the Lord. You wait for me to come, and together we will sacrifice. Then verse 9 onwards. So he panicked. At that time he panicked. When he saw that situation, he panicked. And then he said, bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings. And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived and Saul went out to greet him. It was just a little bit too early. He says, as he finished the offering, Samuel, he didn't wait till that time, till this one. But it was not about Samuel, prophet Samuel. It was about waiting upon the Lord. He didn't do that. He disobeyed. And then afterwards, because he didn't do it, because he didn't wait upon, because he was disobedient. Verse 11 onwards. What have you done? Asked Samuel. Saul replied, when I saw that the men were scattering and they did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. 13 and 14. You acted foolishly, Samuel said. You have not kept the command the Lord gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. See, because he did not wait upon the Lord, he lost his blessing. Because the original plan of God was, he had planned not just Samuel. It was not just Samuel that he wanted. 1 Samuel chapter 9 and verse 20. In the last verse it says, and to whom is all the desire of Israel turned, if not to you and all your father's family? In this kingdom it says to your family line. That was the original plan of God. When he chose Saul, he chose his entire family. But because of disobedience, because he did not wait upon the Lord, he lost his blessing. Now if you look at the same King David, he learned. That's what I was telling you, like you learn to wait. He learned to wait upon the Lord. In all his Psalms, if you look at this one, he talked upon, I will wait, I will wait. He always talked about this, I will wait. And he gave reasons why he chose to wait upon the Lord. And one of the reasons he gives is, he chose to wait upon the Lord because he found out that he could trust only in the Lord. He could not trust in man. See, because he knows it's only the Lord who can do it. That's why I will wait upon the Lord. My trust is in the Lord. Psalms 33 verse 16 to 19. Now this is what he found. He says, no king is saved by the size of his army. No warrior escapes by his great strength. A horse is a vain hope for deliverance. Despite all its great strength, it cannot save. But the eyes of the Lord are on those who fear him, on those who hope is in his unfailing love, to deliver them from death and keep them alive in famine. Verse 20 onwards. We wait in hope for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. In him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in his holy name. And verse 22 onwards. May your unfailing love rest upon us. Can you go back to 21? It's there in verse 21. As we put our hope in you. For we trust in his holy name. That's what he found out. Like nothing, no, it's not the king's army. How big, what's the size of his army? That will not save. He found like if I have horses, that's not going to save. He says the Lord. That's why he said, my first is like, because I know I can trust in the Lord. He's the one who's safe. That's why I wait upon him. And the other one, he said, why he waited upon the Lord? Psalms 135. Psalms 130 verse 5. It said, I wait for the Lord. My soul waits. And in his word, I put my hope. It says, I trust in the Lord because I've put my hope in his word. You know, you wait for the Lord because you have his word. His word is there. His word says he will do it. And because of his word, you put your trust. You wait upon the Lord. Because you know you have his word. You always claim, you stand upon that word. And he says, I will wait upon the Lord. That's what King David, that's the reason why he said he waited upon the Lord. And the other one reason why he waited upon the Lord was, you wait upon the Lord because you want to wait for his plan to unfold in your life. You know, that's the reason why. See, we are going by our time. We think that things should happen by our time. But that's not it. See, the reason why we wait upon the Lord is we are waiting for his plan to unfold in our lives. And if you look at Psalms 163 and verse 13, it talks about the children. Psalms 166 verse 13. 166. Sorry, what did I write? No, it's 106 verse 13. That was just to see if you were alert. See, actually here it says, But they soon forgot what he had done and did not wait for his counsel. And verse 14. In the desert they gave into their craving. In the wasteland they put, can you put verse 13 and 14 together? 13 to 15. And then 6. But they soon forgot what he had done and did not wait for his counsel. In the desert they gave into their craving. In the wasteland they put God to test. So he gave them what they asked for, but sent a wasting disease upon them. You know, there's another word in the version it says, but they soon forgot what he had done and did not wait for his plan to unfold. See, the Israelites, God had a plan for them. He had a plan for them. He was providing them manna. Every day was providing them manna. And they got just fed up. And they did not wait upon the Lord. They did not realize that God had some plan for them. They didn't wait. Instead, what they did was they went to Moses. They just complained to him. They said they wanted something and God had sent them these quails. And along with the quails, God also sent a disease. You know, that is the reason why David had learned that he will wait upon the Lord for God's plan to unfold in his life. You know, there were so many times in his life when God delivered King Saul into his hands. There was a time when King Saul was sleeping. All the soldiers that were with him sleeping. And David went there with his sword. All he had to do was just put that into Saul. But he didn't do that. Instead, he says he just cut off the edge of his garment and he went back. You know why he didn't do it? Because he was waiting for God's plan. Not his plan. Any man's plan was that is it. Now he had already been anointed king. And here is his enemy, his opponent. If he just finishes off, he can be the king. But that's not what David was waiting for God's plan to work in his life. For God's plan, for his time. He's waiting for his time. Now, there are two things also that go along with waiting. So one is patience and the other one is perseverance. You see, that's what is needed when you're waiting upon the Lord. That's what King David learned. Psalms 33. Psalms 37 and verse 7. It says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when men succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes." Verse 8, 2 and 9. Can you put all together? 37, verse 7 to 9. Now, King David was talking about this. Like when you're waiting for the Lord, when you're waiting for something, especially when you're waiting for the Lord and things are not happening. You know, what can it lead to? He's just asking, he's turning and says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when men succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret, it leads only to evil. For evil men will be cut off, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land." He said, when you are waiting for the Lord, that's what is needed. Patience, to be patiently wait upon the Lord. Because if we see that something like, and see what happens is like, if it's not patience, it will turn into anger. And he says anger will turn into sin. And you're not going to get your blessing. It says only those who are waiting patiently, it says, and those In James chapter 1 and verse 2, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Sometimes if you are waiting upon the Lord, if you are not getting answers, and you are going through this, you're going through trials, what you know is that you know that there is a reason, there's a plan. There's a plan that is working in your life. And one of the things is like, He wants you to develop that perseverance. He wants you to keep on. Don't give up. You keep on with it. And next verse, verse 4 to 5. No, you went to 6. Perseverance must finish work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. That's the reason why. If you're waiting on the Lord, you're going through trials and troubles, you still continue because it's a test of faith. God is working, and what He wants to do is He wants to see you mature and complete, and you don't lack anything, not lacking anything. Because there's a plan. God's working in our lives. And also, like when you're waiting upon the Lord, there's something that King David found. What he found is, you just don't wait on the Lord endlessly. Just waiting on the Lord is Psalms chapter 27, verse 13 to 14. David is so confident, he says, I am still confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord. What he said was, he will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. He said, I will see it with my eyes. I will see the goodness of the Lord with my eyes. That's what we're saying, the land of the living. Sometimes what happens is, we think that there's nothing impossible for God. He will do it. Sometime He will do it. We resign ourselves to that. That's what also happened when Lazarus died and the Lord Jesus went there. So when He went there, He met Martha. Martha was the first person who came out. John chapter 11, verse 21. First thing she said, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if he had been here, my brother would not have died. And then the next verse. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. She said that, I know if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But even now, God will give whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. When He said rise again, Martha didn't think about that. She will see it. With her eyes, she will see it. What her answer was after 23. Martha answered, I know He will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. She didn't think that it will happen then. She would think sometime, yes, when there's a resurrection, everyone will rise. Lazarus also will rise. Because I'm thinking that she was the one who sat at Jesus' feet. But then Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. And then, she saw with her eyes her brother being raised from the dead. So, now going back to what King David said, he was confident of this. He said, I am confident of this, that I will see the goodness of the Lord. when I wait upon Him. So this is what we have. Like, Apostle Paul also talked about this. Romans chapter 8 verse 25. He was talking about, but if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. He was talking about patience there, like when we have hope, we wait for it patiently. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 7. Therefore, you do not lack any spiritual gift as you eagerly wait for our Lord Jesus Christ to be revealed. Just don't think when you're waiting, there's nothing is happening. Like it's a time that's going waste. When you're waiting for the Lord, you're receiving strength. And it says like, you will not lack any spiritual gift as you eagerly wait. God is going to, even at that waiting time, God is going to give us every spiritual gift. It's not when you're waiting upon the time, it's not a time that is just wasting. It's not a time that's going by. And Titus chapter 2, verse 13. While we wait for the blessed hope, the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. Now I was just talking about waiting in this world for our needs or whatever we have to think. But this is one thing we all have to wait. This is called, it says it's the blessed hope. It is the coming back of our Lord Jesus. We all wait for that. We have to wait for that. Because if we wait for the coming back of the Lord, as it says, there are so many blessings, but even in our daily life, if that is our focus, that we are waiting for the coming back of our Lord, it corrects our life. We will stay in the path of righteousness. And even in those days, like when they were just thinking that the Lord will come back, and it's not happening, people were losing heart. But all the apostles, the disciples, they kept on encouraging the people. You wait. You wait. It's just that, don't think that God, He has a plan. Whereas He has a bigger plan. He has a plan to bring so many souls into His kingdom. Yes, so many souls in His kingdom. But what you do is, you wait for His coming. You wait for His coming. Shall we all stand?